Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Grief in the Raw. My name is Kelli Holloway. I am your host, and I'm so fortunate to have you joining us through the airways, if you're watching on Instagram, however you are getting your Grief in the Raw dose. I'm very, very excited to have you here for another episode. I'm even more elated to introduce to you my next guest, who is Miss Gabrielle Phillip. I'm going to give her a formal introduction, but first I just want to say, Greensboro, stand up, all right? We've got Gabby. Gabby, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Kelli. I'm so excited, my sister friend.
Yes. Oh my gosh, y'all. We've got a really good episode with wonderful conversation packaged for you today. Without further ado, let me introduce to you formally Miss Gabrielle Phillip. She is a proud Trinidadian American with deep North Carolina roots. Born in Atlanta, Georgia, and raised for a time in St. James, Trinidad, Gabby is proud to call Greensboro, North Carolina home. She is an active duty Army soldier with almost 16 years of service, serving in special ops as a psychological operations specialist, and she is a sergeant first class. She is deployed 5 times in service to our country with 1 combat duty station tour. Gabby is a proud mother of a 13-year-old daughter and 14-year-old bonus daughter by way of her very loving partner, Tony. She is also caregiver to her mother, Miss Janet Phillip, who is 76 and living with dementia. Again, y'all, please help me welcome Gabby, my sister.
Thank you so much, Kelli. I really appreciate it. And again, it really is not only a pleasure to be here, but it's also an honor as well, because you have taken what is a very traumatic situation, grief, period. And, I know a little behind the scenes of what, the loss of Miss Cheatham has been like for you. And so for you to take that and to enter into a space not only for catharsis for yourself, but in an attempt to not only help others, but to find your own journey and healing through that, and being as vulnerable as you have been. I just can't express, again, not only as a friend to you and to, my brother Mike, but just as a woman, as an only child, as an only daughter. I completely empathize with you at times, even though we aren't going through the same thing. And I just, again, could not just be prouder of you for the boldness and the audacity that you have. Just very proud of you.
Thank you. Listen, where are the tissues already?
Oh, no.
Thank you. I appreciate you, because I know we're going to get into it a little, but listen, y'all, when I tell you Gabby is not only a soldier overseas, but she's a soldier here and goes to bat for her friends, the way that she loves and how she loves hard and how she is held by hand through some of the toughest, most hardest roads. I am honored to be able to thank you publicly for that. So for those private discussions that we've had, but also for your commitment to help others in their walk. It's a dope, bold move of yours. So I just appreciate you right back.
No, thank you. Thank you.
So let's start with the grief scale, because that's what we do. Every time we meet at this Grief in the Raw table, we discuss how are we feeling with our grief, how are we holding our grief today, in full recognition that some days it's going to be lighter, some days it's going to be heavier. Here on the show, our grief scale is a 1 to 10. 1 is I'm feeling light, I'm not really holding much grief in my body today. 10 is very, very heavy. for a variety of reasons. And I would love to know, one, I want to check in with guests who are on the show, always want to check in with you, but also listeners, I want you all to think about where are you on the grief scale, because it always matters, it's always valid. So Gabby, can you share with us, where are you on your grief scale today?
Well, I would say today, because I've been priming myself to have this conversation with you, I am at a 10, but a good 10. I'm
Okay.
feeling it.
All right.
I feel because I've had time to reflect on what does grief really look like for me, the complexities of grieving and we'll get into it, a father who wasn't present in my life but has passed, while also grieving a mother that is still very much with us in body and in spirit, but not so much in mind. So I feel it. I feel it. I felt it a little bit an hour before we got started as I'm prepping. I felt like my anxiety go up a little bit, but also I felt light knowing that I was coming to a safe space, which I
Yeah.
haven't always had when discussing this journey that I'm on. So
Yeah.
I'm at a 10, but it's a
Whew.
good 10. I feel it,
Yeah.
all the way in my mind because I'm thinking about it, in my
Mm-hmm.
heart because it was beating a little harder, but my heart is full, is again being able to be here with you, knowing that this really is an empathetic place and
Mm-hmm.
safe space. Yeah, just because I'm on today, I'm at a 10 on it today,
Yeah.
honestly.
And I love your honesty, but also the recognition that you're at a 10, but you're functioning and you actually are letting yourself feel it. That's half the battle right there, is recognizing when you're at the height of your grief and your feelings, but being able to address it and so eloquently express it to others. That's growth. So I'm proud of you for that growth. And I thank you for sitting in it and allowing that moment to come up in all the ways that it's going to, because that's natural, right? And that's what this is all about, is letting people know and recognize that it's okay when you're at a 10, but to recognize it, and where do we go from there. So thank you for sharing that. I'm at about a 5. I'm about middle of the ways. One, because over the last few weeks I've been having these kind of discussions with folks that come on the show, so I'm kind of primed in a different way of making space and intention for those that are coming to share their stories with me, which I do not take for granted. Also, I'm at a 5 because I'm in North Carolina this week. My daughter is on fall break, so we came home to North Carolina, but this is our first time being home. For those that don't know, probably about a year and 2 months after my mother passed, we made the bold decision to uproot our lives and move across country to Texas, Houston, Texas. So I'm from Raleigh, North Carolina. This is my first time being back in about 10, 11 months. So when we touched down in the plane, that gravity pulls you, but it was a different pulling in my body that said, I'm home now. And the first thing I wanted to do was call mom. I've landed, right? And I'm like, oh my gosh, even then the tears just started to well up, because it was the realization that for the first time I'm coming into North Carolina, but I don't have my mom to call to let her know that I'm home. And that was tough. And so navigating the different spaces and places that we would go normally has been different, but I'm at a 5. I'm in the middle with it, because there is a glory in being able to share those stories and those places with my kids, and being like, this is where Nana loved to go, and this was the house that Nana was living in, and all of those kind of things. So even though I'm flooded with the memories, I'm still able to stand in it and walk in it and say, okay, this shows growth as well, that I'm able to come back here and just let myself feel.
Hmm.
Yeah. So my first question for you, of course, here we talk about grief, we address it, we unpack it. My first question for you is, when did you first realize that grief was a part of your journey?
I first realized grief was a part of my journey, I would say in middle school. And I would say it was in the 6th grade the second time I had to do sixth grade. And how does grief play into me having to repeat the sixth grade? Sixth grade, my first time in sixth grade was when I first realized that my father was not going to be a part of my life. I had had sporadic interactions with him in my youth, but it was when I was in the sixth grade that it became very evident that I no longer was going to have a relationship with my father. And what I didn't realize, what was affecting me at the time, was I was grieving the fairy tale that so many young kids have to grieve, which is, I'm not going to come home to the house with the picket fence, 2 parents, 2.5 kids, and a dog. It was going to be my single mother who worked third shift, left me at home every night, by myself since the time I was 8, to take care of myself, to be independent, right? I think that's when it first hit me that, stuff isn't sweet out here. And that is where it was, because I had a friend at the time who did have the 2-parent household, brothers and sisters. She didn't have a dog, but she had a cat. And I was following behind that girl like nobody's business. And I was filled with so much rage, so much anger, always getting into fights, was on the academically gifted program, but could not stay in school because I was always getting suspended or always in something. I wasn't showing up for myself. But when you are, 10, 11 years old, you don't have the language to say, I'm really dealing with this. You're just you're going to show out. You're going to show your full behind.
Right.
And that's what I did. And so it ended up me having to repeat the sixth grade, which now I'm so grateful for, because that put me on the pathway to the very next year, meeting my best friend and building a friendship with my best friend, with Bethany for all those years, which put me on track to go to high school with Michael Holloway, which put me on track to go to high school with Shannon Whitaker, to go to high school with Justin Jefferson. And those core group of friends have remained my friends and have carried me through all sorts of different types of traumas and grief. But that's when I really realized that, in life, grief is such an essential thread in the fabric of our lives, because we spend so much of our time grieving things, feeling the loss of things in small ways and in big ways. And so you can grieve the loss of a relationship with a parent. You grieve the loss of relationships with your first middle school sweetheart, your high school sweetheart. You grieve the loss of dreams. And it's something that's the first time I really realized that, life kind of sucks sometimes.
Yeah. So much wisdom there, even out the gate, Gabby, of being able to, one, recognize that you didn't have the language as a child, and how it came in all these different variety of ways. And I think that is so important for parents to know when you're, having a child who you feel like is just acting out, because, okay, let's slow walk this and figure out what are the changes, what are the elements, what are the dynamics within not only the relationship, but what does that child's environment look like? Has change been thrusted upon them? Does their family look different than the families and the friends that they have? All of those things are really important pieces to the puzzle of figuring out why and how to help that child. And so I appreciate you offering your story really as a lesson to parents that are trying to figure it out, to caregivers that are trying to say, well, what in the world do I do? Because I think that that's a really important thing that's missed sometimes in childhood, is that a child is grieving and it's overlooked, and then it is just placed on that child until they're adult, and they're typecasted in that way.
Right.
And I'm so proud of you for holding on to your group of core friends. And even if you didn't say, y'all, I'm grieving, that might not have been the language, but the way that they were able to show up for you in those moments, that's impactful. So I want to know, in terms of your mother and the impact of grief in her life, how has that impacted you as her caregiver, in kind of seeing throughout the generations how grief has impacted her, and then now you? How has that informed your grief journey?
So I'll just give like a quick little backstory.
Yeah.
So my family, I was raised primarily by my mother, and my mother is now 76 years old. My mother immigrated to the United States in the early 80s from Trinidad and Tobago, and she lived in Atlanta. My grandmother immigrated to the United States from Trinidad in the 1960s, and she first started off as a caregiver for a family. So my grandmother immigrated to the United States, and she ended up working as a nanny and housekeeper for a family in Colorado. And anyone who's ever seen the show Atlanta, there's an episode called Trinity to the Bone. Kind of basically encapsulates that kind of experience that a lot of immigrant women, particularly Black immigrant women, have, and brown immigrant women as well. So caregiving and doing for others is just a part of all that I've ever known. Before my mother and my grandmother came to the United States, they were caregivers for their respective mothers and grandmothers. It's always been commonplace to have your grandmother and grandfathers in the home. So when I was a young child, my mother sent me to Trinidad to live with my grandmother, so my grandmother could care for me, so my mother, as a single mom, could do what she needed to do.
Gotcha.
And then throughout the years, from the time when we lived shortly in Jacksonville, Florida for a little bit of time, my grandmother lived with us. When we moved to Greensboro, my grandmother lived with us. And then she would go and then come back. And when I was in the 8th grade, my grandmother went into a diabetic coma in Trinidad, wasn't found for multiple hours. And immediately my mom, my mom, who was a single mom with one child, immediately dropped everything to include her child with family, so she could go back to Trinidad and care for her mother.
Wow.
And I spent, I think it was like 6 weeks in Atlanta. And because my mom dropped everything so fast, she didn't have power of attorney set up for my aunt. She didn't have anything, so I couldn't go to school. I spent a month and some change out of school, right? I was just in Atlanta with my mom's sister. And so when my mom came back and my grandmother fell ill again after I graduated high school, my mom retired early from American Express, dropped everything and moved back to Trinidad to care for her mother. But that time she was watching her mother transition. My grandmother needed around-the-clock daily care, and it was provided for her through home health aides, but my mom was there every day. And I share this about my mother, never to shame her, but really this is a story of some triumph and resiliency here. My mother resorted to heavy drinking because she was the eldest of 6.
That's a lot of pressure.
A lot of pressure. And she's there caring for my grandmother. And, she resorted to heavy drinking. And I'm now having to look in on my mother now, who's dealing with her own grief. All of the firstborn immigrant daughter pressure, how she succumbed to that pressure, went through severe alcoholism. I bring my mother back to the United States, and through the grace of God and a lot of hard work, help to pull her out of alcoholism. And to be clear, I helped to pull her out, but 100% of that had to be on her, because you can't make somebody not be an alcoholic. Yeah. And to watch how my mother how she processed her grief kind of informed me of like how I don't want to go through things. Right? How I don't want to, like, I'm scared, right, of falling into alcoholism. I'm scared to do it. And I almost, if I'm being honest, I know that there are times and spaces within me that almost want to reject being a caregiver altogether sometimes, because it's like, I saw what it did to my grandmother. I saw what it did to my mother. But here's where we are. And so rather than approach it through that fear and seeing how my mother navigated that, I am just doing my best. And sometimes my best really looks crappy some days, but it is my best to center myself in knowing that I'm doing the best for my mother the best way I can. And wherever the solution is to help make this easier on all of us, that's just where it needs to be. And it's kind of hard when you're in limbo, or you don't really know what the next steps are, or you can't take a certain step until this thing happens. But I just watching how my mother handled the loss of her mother, and her father, but lesser. My grandfather really wasn't in the same sort of situation my grandmother was in, where it was like constant care, and to now be in a very similar situation. It's taught me the lessons of essentially what not to do, but not in a disrespectful way to my mother, saying I don't want to be anything like her. As a matter of fact, the resiliency that she's shown is inspiring. But it taught me that there is so much more to life than just being a caregiver, than just being a daughter. And it's okay. And it's okay to be the friend, to be the partner, the wife, the girlfriend, the mom, the best friend, or just yourself through it all. And it's okay.
I love that. So much of that resonates, because there is that point where you, as a daughter, feel as though, well, is this part of my DNA? Reaching out to these vices, is that going to be my story too? So that recognition that you have of, well, no, I'm going to still lean into it, because it's part of me. It's the caring spirit that I have, the honoring my mother, honoring your parents, right? We still want to do that, but we know that we got to do it a different way, because we've seen the effects of it going the opposite way. Right. For you, it may be alcoholism. For me, it was enmeshment. I saw how my mom's debilitating disease, but also her depression and her grieving the loss of her mother, how that turned into an enmeshment of me being the only child. She wanted me all the time. So anytime I would venture out and do anything else, it was, well, what about me? We need to be together. And so I had to do my own deep work through therapy, through making sure that I was praying about it, but also being very vocal about my boundaries as well, and realizing that, okay, just because my mom did it that way doesn't mean I'm going to do enmeshment with my daughters, right? And so I've even had to pray about, and I've even said to Mike, I don't want to like completely not have any ties to them. Like when they say, I want to go to Myrtle Beach, yeah, go for 2 weeks. Like, I don't want to do the opposite, overcorrection, trying to make sure that I'm not in an enmeshment situation. But it's hard to do, because you're like, but I know what it's like to go the other way. So I have to kind of bring it into a lane that I can control. And I love how you have framed, not because it's in a disrespectful way and saying that they did anything wrong. They did the best that they could with the tools that they had. But now we have an opportunity to see what they went through and be better. And that's what you want generationally, right? You want for things to get better. We want technology to get better. We want medicine to get better. We want the situations in our country to be better. So why not, why is that different when we look at the families? Sometimes our
Right.
families want us to stay pigeonholed to the same way. Well, that's how we've always done it. And I think that's
Yes.
what breaking generational curses. It
Yes.
takes that bold step to say, up, but there's another way. And I'm going to show you, even if I have to be the only one. So I'm very proud of you doing that, because what you're doing is creating resiliency for your daughters as well. I hope you know that.
We try. That's all we do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So how, when with all of these, you kind of mentioned the different hats that you wear as well. So with all these different hats and all these different roles, talk to me about how you balance that feeling of anticipatory grief, right? You also talked about grieving your father after he passed, but even before he passed, him not really having a role in your life and childhood, and now you're kind of at this situation. I'm not going to call it a crossroads, right? Because no one knows how long we have on this earth. But that anticipatory grief of caring for your mother, but you start to see that she's closer to transition than she wasn't close. You know what I mean? So talk me through, how do you balance all of the roles and responsibilities against that anticipatory grief?
And it's funny. We'll start with at first you about my father. So I found out my father died when I went to Atlanta around my 16th birthday, and that was November. Um, but the thing is, my father had passed many, many, many months earlier in January of that year. So I didn't even know that my father had passed away. When it happened, I had to find out many, many, many months later.
Wow.
And
I'm so
so
sorry.
it's, and that's one of those things where it's like, I come back and I'm like, well, I found out my dad died. And it's like, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm like, yeah, he died in January. It's December now, but thanks, thanks for it. You know what I mean?
Yes, so having that experience of like a delay grief and still not even know what to do with it, because it's like, yes, my father died, but also I hadn't spoke to the man in, however long. It's like years and years, no contact, no nothing. So it was more like confirmation of the feeling that I felt when I was in middle school and I was in sixth grade, like, okay, yeah, here we go. Life sucks. Um, and then with the many hats I wear, I'll just be real with you. I don't know how I'm dealing with it some days. I don't, because the other day I heard Vice President Kamala Harris speak about one of her plans to, get Medicare the ability to pay for, in-home care for seniors, which would be a godsend for me. And one of the things she was explaining was that a lot of times people can't afford to care for their ailing loved ones and seniors, and a lot of times that they have to quit their jobs. And my whole thing is, I don't have that kind of job that I can quit. And that is not to woe is me, as I know that there are people who are part of this sandwich generation, raising kids while also caring for their parent, right? Who are doing it in far less better circumstances than I am, right? I feel for the woman who may work a call center job or even work fast food or anything like that, and they're struggling. But the unique constraints of being on active duty, where I can't all the time just at one point just be like, all right, well, I'm going to take family and medical leave, right? I can take FMLA, I can take an extended leave of absence. No, I get 30 days of leave per year and extra if I carry it on from the last year. And so I have a very finite amount of days, literally, that I can put towards caring for my mother. And before she was living with me, and that was easy to deal with, and the intent when I got back from my last rotation, which I just got back 3 weeks ago, was for her to just come back in. We get, some home health care or somebody come visit every other day or so just to make sure she's okay. But this July, she had a slip fall and she broke her neck. And now, so
My goodness.
here we are with my mother in a rehab facility with the very real possibility that she has lost not only more faculties of the mind, but now we're talking about faculties of the body. And so, and I think about, okay, on top of that, I just found out I might be moving units. And I have to take on new leadership responsibilities at work. I am now cohabitating with my partner and my bonus baby and my daughter. So now I'm wearing like stepmom hat and mom hat and, about to be, a new sergeant first class type of hat and, partner hat. And so when you ask, how do I deal with it? Girl, I don't know. Prayer, water, meditation, a Coors Light when the time calls for it. I don't know. Talking to my
Yeah.
friends, talking to my
Yeah.
friends. Very recently setting boundaries with people, letting you know I don't have it. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what you want, like Nene Leak said, well, what you want me to do about it half the time? 'Cause a lot of
Right.
people ask me things, or they're asking me to do things or to make decisions all the time. And it's just
Because you
like,
can't pour from an empty cup, and you
girl,
will not pour.
girl,
That's the
a cup,
boundary.
a cup. People are out here sometimes acting like I'm supposed to have a goblet, a chalice, a jug. They act like I'm supposed to have multiple jugs.
Right.
I, y'all, I don't have it sometimes. But I just do my best to reach out to the support systems that I have, and also being very, very clear with myself that if you don't get yourself together,
Mm-hmm.
you may not be around to take
Mm-hmm.
care of all these things because, every time my phone rings, anxiety shoots up to the point where, I'm having to go see a cardiologist and I'm almost 38 years old. I'm like, well, hello, this isn't it. This isn't the way to do it. So I balance all these hats by being purposeful about taking some of these hats off and being
Mm.
intentional about not letting the anticipatory grief and all the things. I'm intentional about removing shame and guilt behind it.
I love
If
that.
I got to take a minute, I just have to take a minute. And if the worst happens in that minute, the worst was just going to happen.
Yeah.
There's nothing I Here we go. There is nothing I can do to stop, I personally can do to
Mm-hmm.
stop the progression of dementia. If I could,
Absolutely.
I would have done it a long time ago. There is nothing I personally can do to make someone discharge my mother early and get North Carolina Medicaid placed, get her placed in a memory care facility like that. That there's nothing I personally can do, and that is frustrating
Yeah.
because life has taught me I'm always supposed to have the answers. Life has taught
Mm.
me, or rather, let me correct that. Life hasn't taught me, I have interpreted life's lessons as
Mm.
I'm always supposed to have the answer. I'm always supposed to know what's going on. When the phone rings, I have to pick it up because I'm the one in charge. I'm the one that's supposed to be responsible for it. And I'm trying to be intentional about saying no. No, I need no to become my favorite word. I need to be
Yes.
saying no so
Default.
many times a day to
Yeah.
where yes is the exception. That's where I'm at with it. And I know that that sounds like, well, girl. Well, yeah, it's hard. It's been very hard. But when the minute my health starts becoming an issue, well, again, I can't stop the slow progression, but what I can do and find healthy ways to take care of myself so that I can bring my blood pressure down,
Mm-hmm.
so that I can stop my atrial arrhythmia. I can do that. What I can't do is fix all of my mother's problems and everybody else's problems.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's a whole word. My therapist told me recently, because yes, therapy. If you didn't know, now you know therapy is the jam, right? But my therapist told me recently, she was like, it's great that you love in relation to forming boundaries. It's great that you love all these people and you want to do all these things. That's great, but I need you to love yourself a little bit more.
Hmm.
And when you do that, you make that room for you to be assured in your yes and your no. And that's where it is. It's, do we love ourselves enough to to prioritize ourselves in front of anything else, and know that's not selfish. That's essential. That's essential if you're going to do caregiving, if you're going to do mothering, if you're going to do all those other things that are required of your time. You have to prioritize you. So I'm very proud of you working towards that and doing that, because I know it's not easy. It's not easy to say no. We're talking about no being your default, but it's not easy. And so you walking in that and sharing the realness of it all, that's what's going to help some people break that cycle of the yes, 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 yes. Because when I tell you your skin looks good, I can tell you drinking your water. I love it. And others will
Girl, I'm
benefit
out
from
here
it
trying.
too. Listen, let's get into the social media segment. So on the show, we like to play around with a segment of something we've seen on social media that is at the intersection of life and grief. And I think it was purposeful, as we're talking about grief throughout the generations, to share this clip. It's a comedy sketch. I want to encourage those who are listening to actually watch the YouTube video of us, because you'll be able to see it in real time. But the young lady that is doing the sketching, she's talking in different she's taking on different roles in her family. So you can't necessarily visualize that when you're listening, but when you go back and watch it, you'll be able to see, because she changes her whole demeanor, her outfit and everything, and you can kind of see. So I'm going to play it for us, but I definitely want y'all to follow up by watching, and then Gabby and I are going to discuss it.
I don't have time to cry. I gotta plan this funeral. I gotta call the coroner, the florist, the caterers, and then in 5 years, I'm going to completely snap.
Yeah, I'm coming to the funeral, but I'm gonna show up late just to piss everyone off. And I can't wait to start a fight just to make mom cry.
I'm gonna give the eulogy. You can't spell funeral without fun.
I'm gonna show face to pay my respects, collect my inheritance, and then I'll be back for the next one in 10 years.
I'm gonna get my kid to play a song to distract us all from this conflict, and we're gonna just pretend that we're one big happy family.
Yeah, Grandpa was cruel and abusive, and he tormented us all, but I'm gonna overlook that, and I'll only speak of his legacy. That way our generational trauma will never end.
So y'all, that comes from Dr. Judith Joseph.
That last one was
Instagram.
tea.
Woo! Baby.
That last one was tea.
Like, of course, that's satire, right? And I appreciate Dr. Judith for going there, because a lot of times we feel like we can't say those things, we can't express those things. So I love that she did it in such a comical way, but also starts conversation, right? Because I have heard before, and I truly believe, Gabby, you may agree with me on this, that weddings and funerals bring out the absolute best and worst of family members. And I say that knowing full well that you attended my mother's funeral. So this is about, what, 2 years ago, that you came and you helped fill in the gap. And I appreciate you. You know, when I said before about Gabby being there for me and being there for my family, I mean it. She didn't just talk about it. She was about it, and she pulled up. And so you were there at my mother's funeral. So number one, thank you for standing in the gap, because as you know, when you're planning a funeral, there's just this blur. You don't really remember who all is there and what all is done and what all is said, because you're just in the throes of planning it. But your presence was felt, and I appreciate you for that. Within the context of our discussion today about generational things, and then this skit on funerals, what sparks and what resonates for you with what Dr. Judith was talking about?
Well, the first one, I feel like, besides being the messy one at the funeral, because I've never done that. I've never been the messy one at the funeral, but I definitely have been the hero before. I have had the honor of eulogizing two people very close to me. My first mentor in the Army, Master Sergeant Jamal Bowers, rest in peace. I was able to eulogize him at a memorial, but I also eulogized my grandmother. And I don't know why I raised my hand and said, I'll give the eulogy because I thought I could do it. And I empathize with this feeling like, again, like we talked about, I'm the strong one. Okay. While all of her children are crying, while my mother is, drowning herself in wine and vodka, I said, I'm gonna put my cape on. And but it didn't take me 5 years to break down. I broke down right up there at the church, because I realized that in all this trying to be strong about it, I didn't give space to honor the life and the legacy of my grandmother, who now, if you know me and you talk to me, we have a conversation long enough, you're always going to hear my grandmother used to say, and my grandmother this, and my grandmother that. And I realized that, boy, my mother is her mother's daughter, and I'm Lucille's granddaughter for sure. Yeah. So, an example of something my grandmother would say, um, if somebody, she had a very discerning spirit about her. And if you introduce her to somebody, let's just give it a name, let's just say Gordon. She would say, I see Gordon, I don't stay Gordon. Because she was very careful about, yeah, I'm seeing you, but I'm not giving life. I'm not speaking life into whatever type of character that is that you got going on. I don't no. I see it, I don't say it. Okay? We're not doing that. Um, and she was just that woman was a very fierce, strong woman. Yeah.
I hear her and I see her in you. Oh my gosh. Okay, give me something else. Tell me something else that you would say.
Oh man. Oh my gosh. Having that experience of having my grandmother live with us all the time is just, she was very instrumental in calling me out in a way. My grandmother saw me in ways that I don't think other people could because she was at a space in her life to do it, especially being retired and living at home while my mother is busy working. My grandmother would see me zoom around the house and not have patience and wanting to do too many things. And she would say, well, you really need to be careful about that because you're trying to chase this, you're trying to chase that. You need to sit down because you're never satisfied. And you won't be satisfied until you break something or till something bad happens. And boy, was she right. You're never satisfied. I've never, she was like, you're not going to be happy until things fall apart. So you need to settle down and you need to focus. You are doing entirely too much. And sometimes those words, even now, fall on deaf ears, and I have to big it back together
Reel it
like, girl,
back
you
in.
you're doing entirely too much. And she imparted such a spirit of hard work and resiliency in her children, and even that comes through in my mother. And the way that my mother felt like she had to put her cape on and go take care of her mom. So, you know, I and when we're talking about grief, this is one of the things is my grandmother passed in 2012.
So
And one of
sorry.
the last conversations I had with my grandmother was over Skype when I was deployed. And I had earlier that year in 2013, I said 2012. My grandmother died in 2016. I apologize. But one of the last like in-depth conversations my grandmother and I had, I was deployed, and we were on Skype. And earlier that year in 2013, I had gone through a divorce. And my grandmother, who had gone through a divorce in the 60s, which is like, hello, like
Right.
what a brave, bold woman.
Unheard of. Yeah.
Unheard of, with six children, right?
Whew.
we're on Skype, and I was just telling, she was asking me how things were going, and I said, well, Granny, I'm here, I'm getting adjusted, but things have been hard. And she said, well, Gabby, here's the thing you have to know. Everything is always going to be all right because I has no choice but to be all right. Things are just as they are. And, I don't think a lot of times I really appreciate it, just how all right things can be, because and when you're talking about that anticipatory grief, I'm always waiting for the shoe to drop. And
Yeah.
I've seen that show up in so many ways in my life. I found and met the love of my life, and for the first 2 years of our relationship, I was expecting the shoe to drop. When my mother first had her stroke and was diagnosed with dementia, I just kept waiting for the shoe to drop. But my grandmother said, everything is going to be okay because it has no choice but to be okay. And what we do in the meantime, from flash to bang until the end, is up to us because
Absolutely.
it will be okay. And so, to harken back to what I said before, that's the time, those are the kind of words that give me strength to say, your mother has dementia. Dementia's not just going to go away.
Yeah.
She had it yesterday, she's going to have it. She has it today, she will have it tomorrow. So, if she's in a facility where she has 24-hour around the clock care, do you need to be at her bedside for 24 hours of the day? Is
My
it all right?
sister.
It's okay to say, I went Monday and Tuesday, Wednesday, I need to take a nap,
Yes. And refuel.
and
And
that's
refocus.
okay,
And that's
right?
okay.
And that is okay because, Kelly, everything is going to be all right. So stop.
Yeah. Ah, thank you. And that is such a brave and bold choice to walk in that. And I love the legacy that your grandmother has left you with, to be unapologetic in it. Right? Even in the days that you don't feel overly confident, you have her voice and her demeanor in your spirit, reminding you, tapping you on the shoulder, saying, and that what you're saying in terms of the other shoe to drop. I remember, now being kind of on the other side of it, right? In those final weeks, as my mother started to transition, I had this really huge, like, it almost felt like an ulcer in my stomach. And it was deep, and it would start when the sun would go down. Like, all day I'd be okay, I'd keep myself busy. But as soon as the sun started to go down, I started to feel almost like this churning happening. And I'm like, oh God. And it would almost like wrestle with me throughout the night, right? And when she passed, that went away. And I think it went away because I had the understanding that she's now with the Father. She's not going through that pain. She is delivered from it all. To be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. And so it eliminated my worry about her and her life, and is she being cared for? Are the right things happening? Are the interventions working? It replaced that feeling now with just the void of not having her. I can't tell you which one's better. Both of them suck, right? It's still a
Yes.
pain. It's still this thing that you have to surrender to. But in each of those moments, it was the surrendering, and it was she's in the best place that she possibly can be, in the hospital, round the clock. And I had that same thought of, so what I'm doing, I'm just facilitating the worry right now. And it's hard not to worry. But I think you taking that brave choice to remember and remind yourself, I hope that others are able to adopt that same mantra, because caregiving is hard. and it's not
Yes.
made easier
Mm-mm.
by that worry, and that because what that does, that takes you away from yourself, and it chips away at who you are and whose you are when you worry to the point of debilitating your own well-being. So
Right.
thank you so much for that reminder.
And one thing I just want to say for people who know and love or are, in familiar relationships with somebody in a similar situation, you know, we've talked about anticipatory grief, but let's just put it where the goats can get it. My mother is here in body. She's not here in mind. And for the last 2 years, I used to be someone who, I will tell you this, after because I'm an airborne soldier, every jump I have had in the Army since 2009, my first jump out of airborne school, I did 5 at Fort Benning, couldn't have my phone in car. My first jump when I got to my unit, my sixth jump up until my 58th, every time I landed, I called my mother every single time. The last jump I had in March, I called my mother. She said, okay, yeah, you landed. She thought I had gone somewhere. And I just jumped 2 weeks ago. And my mom has forgotten how to use her cell phone. I can't call my mother,
Yeah,
even though she's
I'm so
here.
sorry. Yeah.
And so when I talk about anticipatory grief, when I go see my mother, I've had to grieve this idea of who she is, who she's supposed to be. And one of the hardest things when you're dealing with a loved one who has any sort of memory care issues or cognitive decline is you have to be very mindful that you remember them for who they were, but when you show up for who they are now, and you don't put that on them. But it is so difficult, and it's not something that I talk about often because that's my mother. You know what I mean?
Right.
But when I
Right.
see her, I have to grieve the mother I had and
Yeah.
just be all right with the mother that I have now, you
Yeah.
know? Yeah.
I'm so sorry for that experience. Can I offer you something? And just like I say all the time, take what you need, leave what you don't. The next time you see your mom, before you go in, and this is something that I used to do, I would say a little prayer. Please, Lord, give me spiritual eyes. Give me your spiritual eyes to
Mhm.
see what you want me to see through your lens. Let it be beautiful. Let it be exactly what it's supposed to be in this moment. And I truly believe that in saying that prayer and putting forth that petition, He's going to allow you to see her exactly as you're supposed to see her. And that's an individualized, that's not like a cookie cutter. That's
Mhm.
individual to you, what your needs are and how you are going to stand in the gap for her, but then also allowing others to stand in the gap for you and garner that strength to say, please, Lord, give me spiritual eyes to see what it is that you want me to see when I walk in this room, so that I am not triggered by something unnecessarily that's going to distract me from the service of helping my
Mhm.
mom.
Thank
And
you.
I truly think that that may help. I know it helped me, and I love you, and I'm so proud of what you are doing to help your mother in this season.
And I thank you so much. And on a side note, I don't know who I don't know who told me to put on lashes. Like I wasn't gonna come in here and sob. These jokers been in my eyeball testing me. I don't know. I don't know.
Take them off.
They're
Take them
gone, girl,
off.
because I don't know. I don't know what spirit, let's call it the spirit of vanity, Instead.
Listen, this is grief in the raw. Okay,
Right,
this
okay.
is grief in the raw.
Great. Yeah. And then had the nerve to use press-on lashes, girl, thinking I was gonna be cute. Talk about all day
The
wear.
audacity.
If it's one
Listen.
thing, delusion.
Okay, but you know
Delusion
what?
in the raw, okay?
The, that reminds me of something that I was going to bring up when we looked at that social media clip and talking about all the different roles of the family. I think what's important about that is, yes, everybody's going to take on those different characters. Some of them are exactly like we see, and some of them are so far left that we couldn't even fathom that might be something that we'd come up on. But I believe that if families allow everybody to have their individual reaction without stepping on each other's toes, like,
Please,
let me
yes.
grieve how I want to grieve, and you don't judge the way that I grieve, and I don't judge the way that you grieve, we could all get through this very emotional circumstance, and there's dust settled. There's a white flag, because it has to be. It has to be if you're going to allow
Yes.
someone to truly grieve like they're supposed to.
Right.
There has to be this exchange, and it could be an unspoken exchange, even if because sometimes families aren't talking, right? There's got to be this unspoken exchange of, I'm gonna let you grieve, and I'm gonna grieve the way that I know how to grieve, and then that way we can all kind of move around each other. And so,
Right.
one question that I had for you: what is a part of the equation or the formula for someone that doesn't respect that boundary, right? So like when you said delusion, I feel like there's a dose of delusion in there.
Well, I
What else?
I what the thing about it, particularly when we're talking about, grief, and we're particularly talking about funerals of loved ones, you know, there are seating arrangements for a reason
Oh yeah.
at funerals. Um, and regardless of how you feel about the dearly departed, in no way is someone from the third pew gonna police how someone who's sitting in the front
That's right.
grieves.
That's
And
right.
that really is just, that's
Period.
what it, period. Because, like you said, your grief and your experience with the dearly departed is yours.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
You know, this funeral ain't at AMC Theater, so I don't need you to pull out a projector. Okay.
Right. Right.
It's your experience. But somebody who has judgment or wants to say, well, I would have, okay, Miss Mamas, Mr. Sir, would you like me to do that to you? And
Right.
so when everybody's talking about their roles, the funeral is not the time for you to play the enforcer.
That's right.
I need you to take that somewhere else. But that's what I was talking about, the people that come to the funeral to sow mess and to be messy. See, because I'm the type of person, my grief may show up in ways that might cause you bodily harm. And now the whole funeral's messed up because you over here trying to police my grief.
Right,
Now,
right,
now
right.
I'm gonna police
Stay in the lane. The
stay in
lanes.
your
The
lane.
lanes got to be clear.
Stay in
The
your lane.
lanes have to be clear.
And
That is
now,
like the best
exactly.
practices. Funeral best practices. Let
Best
the lanes
practices,
be your lane,
please.
right? Don't judge others. Have
Please
your
don't.
process. Your process is your process.
Please.
Right? All of those things. Show up how you're gonna show up. And if you can't show up, just don't
Just
go.
don't.
Like if
Just
you can't
don't.
show up in support, if you can't show up in love, just don't go. Light a candle on your own time, in your own space. Let it be
Okay.
that.
And if you have a problem, you can see it. As my grandmother say, you may see problem, don't say problem.
That's right.
Keep it moving, because someone like me, I'm gonna be the reason why great auntie M is coming over telling me my mama wouldn't have liked my behavior today. And I'm gonna tell her, well, I
Right.
don't care. So it's just about, like, funerals, they have such cultural importance to us all. No matter how you show up in the ways in which your faith or your culture dictates them, they are also deeply emotional events. And
Yeah.
at the very least, you know, as they say in Trinidad, have some brought up see. Have some brought up see. Act like someone raised you right. Take the time to reflect on the person who passed. But for the love of God, please don't be in the back pews having anything to say about anybody whose seat has a reserve sign on it. And that's just
That
how I
part.
feel about that.
That part. Oh, I have so enjoyed this conversation, and I feel like we could go in so many other directions. Before I kick to you some rapid fire questions,
Hmm.
I have one more, and it's centered around hope, right?
Hmm.
Because you have gone through so much. You've almost been through the gamut of all the different nuances of grief, from going through all those things that you have described and that pain that you have felt. I want to know, where is your dose of hope? Where does your dose of hope come from? And how are you using that hope to influence the lives of your daughters?
Man, my daughter is my hope. And I know
Yeah.
that is a lot of uh, pressure to put that on somebody to say, how can your daughter be your hope? I would just say that I have seen, because my daughter and my mother are extremely close, and I have seen firsthand how everything, my mother's presence in the good times, my mother's battle with alcoholism, her going through that, plus, the the afterwards of the stroke, and just how much that affected my daughter and some things she had gone through. But in a space now where my daughter is, to be able to provide her a home with the ability to just be a kid and to watch her pick up new skills and laugh and grow and let down some of those walls that she had that caused her to not fully be herself. That's, if a 13-year-old can figure that out, then really what excuse do I have? So using that, I always remind my daughter, I remind Brooke constantly of how proud I am of her, not to build pressure on her to say she can never make a mistake again, or to shame her to say, okay, your past is going to be reflective of who you always will be, but just to let her know, truly, you are amazing, and how that informs, especially when we're talking about two young girls. You know, the world will do to young girls and women what the world does. But as far as me and in my household, I want our daughters to be daughters, to be children. Yes, they are teenagers, 14 and 13. They are still kids.
Yes.
Yeah, you're going to have your chores, but you're not going to come through the door. And I don't expect you to care for your sister and care for this one and care for that one. Your responsibilities are simple. You're gonna bust some suds, you're gonna do your homework, and you're gonna go in
Yeah.
your room and play Fortnite and giggle all night with your friends. And you're not gonna hear your mother and father calling your name 50 times and asking you to come grab you a glass of water. And not gonna, call you 50 times to say, can you do this? Well, you didn't know. You're home. Be a kid. And so I find hope in the way that, like my grandmother said, things will be all right. And I always remember, and it's hard, Kelly, it is hard, but faith and fear are incompatible. You cannot hold those things at the same time. They are oil and water. So I see the hope in all these little ways. The hope comes from knowing that the other shoe hasn't dropped. and it won't. That's the hope.
Mm, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much. Let's have a little fun
Yes, girl.
in the midst of tears.
Happy tears.
Happy tears.
Cleansing tears, okay?
Cleansing, cathartic. Is that
Yay,
the word?
girl. Cathartic
Yes.
tears. Mhm.
So these are rapid fire questions. Don't put too much thought in it. Say what comes up to you first. What's a piece of advice you'd give your younger self about grief?
Girl, a bottle ain't gonna do it. Move on.
That
That ain't
part.
it. That ain't it. Mm-mm.
Yeah.
You just gonna have headaches.
What is your favorite homemade dish, Trinidadian or otherwise? Because y'all, before she answers, Gabby is a cook. She is a chef. And she does all the things. Okay? So tell me, what is your favorite homemade dish, Trinidadian or otherwise?
No, it's always gonna be Trinidadian. My favorite homemade dish is a good curry chicken, curry goat with some bus up or paratha roti. Hands down. That's it. That's
Okay,
it.
can you make that for me the next time that we're together?
Absolutely. And I don't need a recipe. Okay.
That part. Yes. Okay. What is your favorite active duty memory to date? And
Oh,
thank you for your service. I haven't
oh,
said that yet. Thank you for your service.
oh man. Well, I appreciate it. I love what I do, honestly. I think my favorite active duty experience would have been a couple years ago when I was selected to be an instructor. And I took the podium in front of those students for the first time. And after class, there were only a handful of African American students or Black students in the class, and they all ran up to me. And it made me realize that throughout their whole experience, that they had never encountered someone who looked like me before. So it just, not that, I wear it all the time, but it was just a reminder of like, wow, okay. And then finding out that I made Black History being the first Black woman to instruct in the John F. Kennedy Special Warfare Center in school. It's just amazing. And I'm blessed because I honestly do love what I do for a living. So it made some of those harder years worth it to see newer soldiers kind of look up to me. And in a humble brag to know that I'm the type of soldier worth looking up to.
Absolutely. Always bet on Gabby, okay? Listen, don't get me started. All right. I want you to give me a generational trauma red flag and a generational trauma green light and interpret that however you will. Go.
Listen, generational trauma red flag as I've experienced. Um, somebody in particular, a man that don't know how to speak about a mother. And that shows up all sorts of ways. It it gives, and I'm not trying to downplay anybody's problems, but it gives abandonment, and then you looking to me to feel that. I can't do it. So I'm gonna need people who display those type of things to go see the lady. Okay. That's a generational trauma red flag for me. When you see people looking for mothering or fathering in their relationships. And a green flag is I love people who are able to speak about like the traumas that they've gone to. And it doesn't even have to be necessarily something that deep, but when they are able to recognize like patterns and display how they want to change those things while still respecting, their journey, that's always a green flag for me.
Yes, yes. Okay, fill in the sentence. This is Gabby's blank era.
Hmm. This is Gabby's ascending era.
Hmm.
This is Gabby. I'm about to turn 38, which means I'm closer to 40 than I ever was 20, and it is exciting. It is me feeling like I am going into a second puberty. I feel like I'm going through womanly adolescence right now. Um, at this stage in my life, I feel like a woman, and I feel like ascending to womanhood, true womanhood, knowing that I am adulting, but also finding space in this era to tap into all the curiosity, creativity, and happiness and joy that I have jettisoned or abandoned for too long. I'm in my ascending era, okay? She is reaching new heights in small ways and in big ones.
Lord, I've seen what you've done for others. May we all ascend. Okay, the Waffle House crew, because you talked about the core friendships, and I know not everybody knows what that means, but I know y'all got y'all little thing. This is a core friendship from high school. Can you tell I'm a little salty about that? Not all of us have those core relationships
Yeah.
where you still have the best friends from high school. And I love it. I'm not salty. Honestly, I do love it. And I love that my husband is a part of it and that it trickles down to me, the benefits of him being a part of the core group. But I want to know from the Waffle House perspective, what is a key ingredient in keeping y'all's core group strong these 20 plus years?
Everybody just shows up as themselves always. And that's the one thing I love about my friends. Every last friend that I have in the Waffle House group crew came about just from being yourselves. And and we were always vulnerable with each other. Boy, we crack jokes with one another. And even if the group chat isn't popping every day, all it takes is one person to say, yo, I anybody, somebody, I need help. Or sometimes it's
Mayday.
just to share whatever, but that's the thread. It is just having a friendship that's wasn't based in anything. We all have different likes. We all had different sports we played and liked, different activities. I was the only one that was a goofy in JROTC, but they still managed to find their ways to drill meets, to military balls. I found ways to show up to basketball games. Found ways to go over and watch Family Guy. Like we just all had our own unique things, but what bounded us was always just we always knew that we were each other's safe space for everything. And I'm always bragging on the Waffle House crew because I know that there are people going through life who don't even have a best friend. And
Right.
that's also a little bit of a red flag for me, people who don't have
That's
best
right.
friends. Because when I meet somebody and I'm like, who's your best friend? And they say, oh, I have one. I'm like, you got to have somebody out there that loves you for you, boo. All
That's
right, but
right.
uh, so
Got to.
so I know I'm blessed to have the Waffle House crew and to have friends in my life who check me when I need checking, and who love on me when I need loving. And let the record state, never had a falling out. Never,
Mm,
never had a
I
falling
love
out.
it. I love it. That's dope. That's dope. Last two questions. What has grief taken from you? And what has grief given you?
It's taken joy sometimes. It has. It's taken joy. And it's part of why I'm on this journey to find my joy because I have missed so much in the last couple of years, being focused on one crisis to the next, that I haven't truly enjoyed all that I have personally and professionally accomplished over the last couple years. Right. So I feel like all my wins have like an asterisk next to it because there's always some crisis going on. But what grief has given me are the tools that I need in order to ascend to that next place. Sometimes where they say you have to, sometimes you got to go through some things. They say you got to go through some things to get to something.
Yeah.
And so without this, I don't think I would be in the position to be able to love on myself the way I know I need to. Because again, life is gonna life. These things are not going anywhere. But if I don't take care of myself and love on myself, I very well may be up out of here too. So I need to take care of myself. So grief has given me the tools that I need to truly take care of myself.
I love it. Thank you so much, Gabby, for your wisdom, for just being you. Like, I have loved this conversation. I know that others are going to really take something from it. And I'm just so proud of you. Can I say that as your friend and your sister?
Yes.
I'm so proud of you in all of the ways and doing all of the things. Thank you for sharing this sacred space with me. To those listening and watching, as always, take what you need, leave what you don't, share it with someone who needs it the most. Thank you so much, Gabby, for being here.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you. Love you.
Peace, y'all.
Thank you for joining me, Kelli Holloway, inside of today's episode. For a deeper dive, remember you can watch this episode on YouTube and listen on your favorite audio streaming platform. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe. For more information about Grief in the Raw podcast and to connect with me, my special guest, and the Grief in the Raw community forum, visit kellyandco.com. All links are in this episode's description. Tremendous thanks to the producer of Grief in the Raw, Miss Bethany Anderson, and major shout out to Jeffrey Smith, who curated the soundtrack for the pod.